So I created a video saying that Josh Pate from The Late Kick with Josh Pate was wrong about being optimistic about my Clemson Tigers, who I love. And by the way, I hope he's right. Josh, I hope you're right and that I'm wrong. But the video that I was responding to is Josh Pate reacts to Clemson's spring game. I was not referring to your top 10 program. I was referring to Clemson's spring game. Now, I am going to dive into that response. But to everyone else who is watching this, welcome to Clemson Football Live. I am glad that you're here. I am not normally responding to someone who is very well known not only on YouTube, but in the college football community. If you're new here, I hope you'll subscribe and pass this along. So, Josh actually left a comment on my video, and I was slightly shocked. And in fact, Josh, I will directly address you and then sometimes passively address you. But I just want to say, as I said in that video, I do appreciate what you do. I actually like your persona. You're a Southern guy. Hey, you've got the dream job. You fly around, you talk to guys like Kirby Smart. That's incredible. But one of my approaches to Clemson football is just an unfortunate, for a lot of Clemson football fans, a very realistic approach. Now, what you said, and I'm going to show your comment, because in theory, you are 100% right. You said, I'm going to pull this up here. Josh, you said, still waiting to hear where I'm wrong. Articulating a team with this roster, these resources, and this staff should be expected to make a 12-team college football playoff field isn't capable of being wrong in April. Okay, here, let's talk about that. First off, you are right. Clemson, with its resources, and let's think about this. You have that incredible defense that, by the way, has never fell off. The transfer portal, if it was really a problem at Clemson, it would have not only affected the offense, it would have affected the defense. Well, the defense hasn't been affected by it, but that's the transfer portal's not the issue. And that's not what you were talking about, but just throwing that out there. The defense has been incredible for a very, very long time. It's Clemson's pedestrian offense. But you are 100% right that these resources and this roster, pretty much as a whole, and this is where I partially believe you're wrong, this staff should be expected to make a 12-team playoff. How? Well, first of all, the offensive staff, you have Garrett Riley, who's been there for one season. He's going into season number 2. He had a mess to clean up. Well, guess what? There's a reason that Matt Luke is brand new. There's a reason that Thomas Austin was fired. It's because the offensive line play was so terrible that it has actually affected how Cade Klubnik is throwing the football. In fact, almost all the footage that you showed of Cade Klubnik throwing the ball, he was either throwing it into double coverage or being intercepted. And by the way, the guy who intercepted that pass almost picked off 2 or 3 more passes, and he's a true freshman. Like 3 months ago, he was in high school, Tavoy Fegan. So the offensive line is so bad, and even though Matt Luke is great, I mean, I'm thrilled that he's here, he's having to untrain or retrain these offensive linemen who has ran these drills hundreds, if not thousands of times, and they've been poorly developed. That's led to Cade looking the way that he does because the pocket collapse, all of a sudden, he's running for his life. Or he does that thing where he locks in on one receiver and just tries to get the ball to his first choice. Of course, the defense hops the route like, well, you saw during that entire spring practice. And let's talk about the spring practice. Let's pause there for a second. Yeah, this is a scrimmage, and I did hear what you said. You said that you had seen teams before who didn't look that good in spring practice go out and burn up the woods. Maybe so, but not at Clemson. not in recent years. See, the Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson years, it wasn't only those guys that were at Clemson, it was also a coaching staff that was experienced. So between the poor coaching hires until recently, when Dabo Swinney decided to stop hiring first-year coaches, which, by the way, we still have a bunch of first-year coaches on the offensive coaching staff. But that's another reason why I'm not too thrilled about this season, and I believe you're wrong. But to kind of bring it all back together, Cade Klubnik has been poorly developed by the poor coaching staff. And these past two spring games accurately portrayed the following season. So maybe for you and watching teams like, I don't know, Georgia or maybe Alabama, etc., maybe you're right there. But at Clemson, especially with this poor, inexperienced offensive coaching staff until Matt Luke was just hired in December, until that came along, with this poor coaching staff, which led to, and this is on the offensive side of the ball, and the poorly developed players, that's the reason why I believe you're wrong, because they have been a pedestrian offense. The offensive line, they're still struggling. Cade is still locking in on wide receivers. Now, Moffitt didn't play. Brenningstool didn't play. Wesco did play, and you're right. Wesco is he is that former wide receiver Clemson type that we're all used to, that we all pray and beg God that we can get back at Clemson. I agree with you there. TJ Moore will be here in the summer. I agree with you there. You're 100% right. They will be there. And we have wide receivers who are getting healthier. Antonio Williams. And then, of course, Tyler Brown. He stepped up last year out of nowhere. Troy Stellato, the guy he can catch if he can stay healthy. Adam Randall, if he can stay healthy. But the problem comes back to the poor offensive line play that is still there, and Matt Luke is not going to correct it overnight. Which leads to Cade continuing to battle those poor habits that offensive line and poor coaching development has created. A guy that was 45-0 in Texas 6A high school football. You talked about the depth of the defense. Notice I'm not mentioning the defense. The defense is fantastic. The only time Clemson's defense is terrible is when they've been out on the field way longer than they should, and the offense continues to lay goose eggs and jog back to the sideline. So the reason I believe that you're wrong is that the poor offensive line play that's having to be actively dealt with by Matt Luke, and it's going to take time, and most likely it's going to take him replacing those guys. And the question of, can we revamp or re-energize or something, make Cade Klubnik better, break those bad habits? That's why I believe you're wrong. Garrett Riley, I'm not completely sold on him. I am pumping the brakes there. But remember, his last game before he was hired at Clemson was a 64-7 loss to Georgia. And since he's got to Clemson, his offense looks little, if any, better than Brandon Streeter, who was fired after 1 year. Now, I do agree with you. After that Georgia game, we'll know a lot about Clemson. But between you and I, and everybody who's watching this, I already know what that Georgia game is going to end up like. Why? Is it because I'm psychic? No. It's because here's another reason why this scrimmage, this glorified scrimmage called a spring game that's televised, means so much to a lot of people like me, and why we're freaking out is because our offense looked the same this past week in the spring game as it did during the season that we lost 4 football games. It looks the same. You're right. If you rebut me and you say, hey, Maffa sat out. You're right. Again, Brennan Stoll sat out. Yes, you have to give Matt Luke time. I agree with you. But it looked just like this past season. And Matt Luke is amazing. But the poor coaching hires by Sweeney, and a few of them are still there. One of them especially is still at Clemson. That cancer has eaten into Clemson. It still got into their psyche. At all these different levels of the team, from the wide receivers to the offensive line, the quarterback. The only thing that is not failing for Clemson on the offense is the running back. And I don't know if I made this point or not, but that clip that you showed of Sammy Brown, the great linebacker that we signed. I'm glad he's there. He's got great hair as well. You saw him beat number 71 off the edge there, right? Right? The left tackle. He beat him like he played recreation football. Do you know that according to 24/7 Sports, that is the former top, I'm talking about the top recruit of the 2021 Clemson recruiting cycle, Tristan Lee. That same recruiting cycle, they had Jeremiah Trotter Jr. in it, Will Shipley, Nate Wiggins, Phil Maffa, Andrew Makuba. But the top recruit for that recruiting cycle was the guy that Sammy Brown beat off the edge and made him look like he was a one-star player. That's how poorly developed this offensive line is. And yes, I harp on the offensive line because they have been that bad. It has affected Cade that much. And then the wide receiver coach, a lot of us are not sold on. He can recruit. We're not sold on that. Could the offensive line in that poor play affect the wide receivers and what they do because they don't get to go through their progressions? Absolutely, you would be 100% right. But these guys, they dropped a lot of passes last year when they were wide open. What did we see in the scrimmage? We saw that, didn't we? We did. The reason people like me believe that you're wrong is because this past scrimmage, which is called a spring game, looked identical to that period when Clemson lost 4 ball games. And the spring game looked identical to the other 2 spring games that accurately predicted the season. I go back to your comment, and I close here. Still waiting to hear where I'm wrong. Articulating a team with this roster, these resources, and this staff should be expected to make a 12-team playoff. These resources, yes. This roster, partially correct. The defense is incredible. Guys like Phil Maffa, they're incredible. Or he's incredible. Brennan Stoll is incredible. Wesco proved that he was incredible. And those other wide receivers that I'm not going to go down the laundry list, they look pretty good. But the offensive line, still, I mean, we're asking Matt Luke to turn urine into water into wine. Really. It's been that bad. The defense, incredible. And our kicking game, very questionable still. And this staff, you said this staff. The defensive staff, absolutely. The defensive staff is tenured. They have great experience. They are actually quite the opposite from the offensive staff. Now, let's pause there. Again, they just hired Garrett Riley. He has 1 season under his belt. Matt Luke was just hired, but they still have Spiller, who had never coached before. Love the guy. Great player. Very infectious attitude. Tyler Grisham played at Clemson, played in the NFL, never coached before. And that's the guy that a lot of people has their eyes on. But before hiring Matt Luke 4 months ago, the guy that was coaching offensive line had only coached for 2 years at Georgia State. And it showed. No offense, Thomas Austin. You're a Clemson Tiger. We love you. It was just too much too soon. But those poor practices has ate into the team. And that's why I believe you're wrong, is because the staff is not that good on the offensive side of the football. And I'm excluding Matt Luke because Matt Luke just got here. I can't blame the guy. Garrett Riley, once again, I'm trying to give him some grace because he was taking over a coaching staff who had no experience. That's the reason I believe you're wrong. Mainly the offensive staff and then what it's turned into on the field. That's the reason I believe you're wrong. So I agree with you. Clemson should be a top 10 program. Dabo Swinney is one of the winningest coaches active in college football. He has 2 national championships. But have you paid attention to how poor we've done over the past, especially 3 years? And I will even argue that Trevor Lawrence, the very last year he was there, he and T. Higgins and Travis Etienne. I mean, listen to those names. They're great. Amari Rodgers. They were so good they were covering up how Clemson had become complacent on the offensive side of the ball. I believe they covered up a lot. But especially these past 3 years, there is nothing to glean from the offense. And so that's the reason people like myself believe you're wrong. Now, if you're just being optimistic, to be optimistic, to give the players a chance and to give the coaches a chance, and you're right, Clemson is a great brand, okay, I get it. But I hope that I articulated it well. Again, I'm kind of shocked that a guy who has 250,000 subscribers actually responded to me. So, again, nothing personal. I like your show. I'm not going to kiss up, but I like your show, and I appreciate your persona. You have a cool gig. I mean, a lot of us would love to have that gig, but that's the reason I believe that you're wrong. Thank you for commenting. Keep doing what you're going to keep doing what you're going to do, and you're doing too well. But thank you, and hopefully we'll cross paths sometime soon. Either way, go Tigers. I hope you're right, and I hope I'm wrong. Folks, if you'll subscribe, hit that subscribe button. Listen, it's not going to hurt your thumb. You just, boom, you subscribe and pass it along to your friends, your neighbors, your clergymen. Folks, it's good to see you, whether we're talking about Clemson between someone who's well-known in the college football world or whether we're just sitting around having a cup of coffee chatting about our Tigers, the recent or the yonder years. It's always good to be a Tiger. Go Tigers.